Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, I watched this video, or well, I'm lying. I listened to part of it by Matt Colville the other day. It just came up on my feed on YouTube, and because I'm subscribed to his channel and like a bunch of other channels that I don't watch all the time. However, it was about hobgoblins and low-level play, and hobgoblins. Who doesn't love a hobgoblin? So. I listened to it for a little while. He took the subject in a different direction than I'm going to take it, which is fine. I mean, maybe I'm being unfair, and he says more about it later on. But I wanted to talk about this really briefly because I really love hobgoblins. It's been one of those tropes, or I don't know if it's a fantasy trope because clearly, like Matt even said, the inventors of Dungeons and Dragons kind of scoured for all of these monsters from everywhere, a bit of folklore, and if you really kind of look at it, things like goblins and kobolds and hobgoblins and orcs and all that stuff, they're really kind of all the same thing. I mean, orc is something that Tolkien made up, but they're goblins. Anyhow, that's completely irrelevant to this. One of the things, I think it was looking at that first edition monster manual and just looking at the descriptions of hobgoblins, looking at that weird armor, that split mail they were wearing, where it was almost this Japanese samurai armor, but also just looking at the descriptions of them there, where they were well organized, that they were intelligent. You look at their intelligence, it's average, it's human intelligence. They're as smart as you and I and our coworkers and the people down the street. They're not these dumb brutes. And what I've always loved to use them as is the Hobgoblin Army, the menace from the north, or is it the south, or the east, or whatever. It's one of my favorite things to throw into a D&D campaign, but I suppose this really could work for just about any sort of fantasy-type campaign if you're going to throw some kind of humanoids into it. And I remember, watching Deep Space Nine, and seeing the Cardassians, and seeing how they were depicted, and having this moment of realization, like, oh my God, those are my hobgoblins. That's exactly how I like them. And so, talk about hobgoblins and Cardassians. The way I like to use them, one of my favorite ways to have them, is some kind of hobgoblin army. This doesn't work in every single campaign, but it's a good one. That is a menace. Maybe it's a menace that's foreshadowed, like somewhere off to the north. They're sacking cities. They're advancing. They are a menace. And I like these days to have humanocentric campaigns where mostly we play humans. However, and I like the idea that there's not like 57 different humanoid races running around. So they are the kobolds and the orcs and the goblins, and it's just this constant slew of monsters. And how in the world did all these things evolve together, etc. I'm showing my biases here. However, it is neat to have some kind of threat that is not human, that is somehow above and beyond just another nation to the north. Clearly, I mean, that works. Okay, stumbling over my words because it's too early in the morning. That works. However, there's that twist that you can put on it when the invading army is not human. It makes it more horrific. It makes it more. You can amp it up a little bit. One of the neat things about things like fantasy and science fiction, just in literature or whatever, is you get to explore themes and turn everything up to 11 because you're not constrained by reality. And in this case, you have, what essentially amounts to an invading force of Cardassians, people that are not like us. I'm looking for a better term, but the racism can be rampant. They can be brutal because they will see you as sub-hobgoblin. Just as you may see them as subhuman. They're just not like us. There's that divide. And what can make that divide much more poignant and much more relevant is when you don't have a slew of other races running around your world. When there literally are things like maybe there's humans, maybe there's some elves or something. You have in the background as like a minor race, maybe not. But then there's these hobgoblins. And the alienness, the not like us, is so magnified when maybe they're the only other race, or only one of 3 or 4 races, and that mostly humans just never really interact with. So they become incredibly foreign, incredibly alien, and having them as an invading force, as an occupying force, as they move into the territory where the player characters are, or if the player characters just kind of move into the way of that side of the Hobgoblin army, can be really, really interesting. And one of the other things I particularly like to do with this is all too often in fantasy games, we kind of have that minion sort of mentality that, okay, well, this is the Hobgoblin army, but then behind the Hobgoblins are the Mind Flayers or, God knows what else. One of the things, and there's nothing wrong with that, but one of the things I like to do every once in a while is what's behind the Hobgoblin army? Well, it's the Hobgoblin army. That's the entire thing. It's like the Nazis. It's like the Cardassians. It's like there's nothing really behind them. I mean, you can have all kinds of fun having little analogs to the Obsidian Order or whatever. You can throw all kinds of intrigue into the Hobgoblin army itself, and have Hobgoblin NPCs and have Hobgoblin wizards and all that sort of thing. We can go hog wild with it. Make them complete analogs to humans in some way, or what's available to player characters and etc. Including just amping them up and having, weak hobgoblins, strong hobgoblins. You get the idea. I mean, we've all done this to one extent or another. But, it can be a lot of fun, is my point, that they can be the threat themselves. There doesn't have to be something else behind them. It can, and the other thing, too, is with a vibe like that, and it doesn't have to be a hobgoblin army, it could be a human army, it could be whatever, could be an army of orcs, and the reason that, using our classical fantasy Dungeons and Dragons trope, what makes hobgoblins different from things like orcs and goblins is because orcs and goblins are stupid, and there generally has to be something behind them. Whereas hobgoblins themselves are this incredibly disciplined, well-oiled machine. They are, when I use them, they are like the Cardassians. They can be brutal and savage, but they're smart. They're disciplined, which makes them far more dangerous and far more scary. But there's something about using an army like that where they're a threat that the player characters cannot really, take over. It's not a challenge in some of the classical ways we sometimes approach role-playing games where, okay, well, there's this way we're going to defeat this challenge and destroy the Hobgoblin army. There may be, it's just this backdrop that you're playing against, as you're adventuring or doing whatever the characters are interested in doing. The Hobgoblin army can be the backdrop. It's something you can't entirely beat. You can maybe help other people. You can try to beat it, or you can try to infiltrate things. You can try to frustrate it, or perform raids. Maybe you become friendly with it. maybe you start playing double agent. Whatever it might be, that's up to the player characters and whatever the direction the game goes. The point is that it's not something that they can defeat. It's not a challenge to be overcome. It is a difficulty or a backdrop that the players have. The challenge is, how do we survive while this is here? How do we accomplish whatever our goals are, while essentially we're occupied or they're invading? Why are they invading? Why are they doing all those things? That's up to you. That can be a lot of fun. But I love hobgoblins. I love that trope. It's something that I pull out every once in a while. I haven't done it in a long time, so probably next time if I run a fantasy type game, which is more fantasy than something like Lamentations Prussia, that sort of thing, where we play more in fantasy land. I may pull that one out again. It's an old favorite. So yeah, just putting that out there. This is more or less just some D&D-isms, some OSR talk. How about that, kids? Take it easy.